So is there arts and crafts fashion? The actual answer to that is no. That there is not actually an active, Gustav Sickley and his crew did not sit down and design a dress or a jacket or a coat. Arts and crafts really was furniture, pottery, metalwork, tiles, lighting, and interior textiles. They did do interior textiles and the motifs are going to cross over. But so this has been an interesting concept, and it's much like I sort of equate this to the idea of having an automobile museum and then bringing in fashion to put with the automobile so you can see what people wore at the same time. That's exactly where I'm at with this, because we're bringing the people in that would have been purchasing the furniture and living with the furniture, but that didn't mean that they were wearing things that were really a part of that. Again, the two are running parallel. They never really intersect, which I didn't realize that. In a deep dive through the Craftsman magazine, and Craftsman went through several iterations, as you know, I think it was probably Irene Sargent who early on was saying, let's mirror to some extent Ladies' Home Journal, because Edward Bach was at Ladies' Home Journal and he was dealing with a lot of social issues. He was trying to craft an American fashion. And there always was, obviously, fashion in Ladies' Home Journal. And so in 1907, the Craftsman had this Our Home department, and every issue had actually images of clothes, but they weren't any different from what we were seeing. These images could be from Ladies' Home Journal. They could be from the Delineator magazine. They could have been from any of a bunch of magazines. They kind of did a spin on things to make it feel as though it was a little more arts and crafts. I love the athletic folk, and one of the things I don't think you're going to see is when I did go and work at Craftsman Farms and went through the wonderful scrapbooks that Marion Stickley kept while she was there, there are pictures of her playing tennis, so I think that's very fun. Here we have the art quality of smocking. So even in showing fashion, they were trying to show the most handwork possible. They also got a little bit involved in the shirtwaist blouse, which was sort of like the jeans of the day. Every woman wore a shirtwaist blouse with some kind of a skirt. And the title of this was Shirtwaist Making from a Craftsman Point of View. And the shirtwaist that they have you make, although you can see the image of the shirtwaist, is out of pure linen, and a lot of it is hand-stitched. So they're working with the concept of arts and crafts, but again, it's not really, the style of it is no different. I wanted to talk to you about our little-known resource here at Syracuse University, which is the Sue Ann Jeanette Costume Collection. So where is the collection? What is the collection? It started out in the College for Human Development, which started out as the College of Home Economics right across the street in Slocum Hall. The collection started, this costume collection started, I think, when it was fashionable for the collecting of historic fashion. It started in 1932. One of the faculty went to an auction in Oneida at the Higginbotham Estate and bought, they said, about 1,000 pieces. We don't know where those 1,000 pieces went, but we're not really finding them. But in 1969, so the pieces were held in Slocum Hall. They had big metal lockers around the hallways, and they just kept the clothes there. In 1969, they decided that there was enough there that they better create an accessioning system. So starting in 1969, we do have paperwork, although anything pre-69, nobody knows where it was from or who donated it. 1972, there was a big fire in Slocum Hall in the costume collection. There was an overzealous student who wanted to see if fire could be contained in a small space, and so they lit the costume collection on fire. So we have great newspaper clippings of the firemen carrying arms loads of clothes out of the building. But it was a huge problem to the collection. A lot of things were actually physically damaged. There was a lot of smoke damage, a lot of water damage. So in 1974, a mimeographed note was sent out to all the alumni from Human Development, or at that point, Home Economics, saying, if you have things to donate, we would like to rebuild our collection. I tell you this because at that point, what everyone seemed to have in their closet was clothes from about 1905 to about 1920. So that period, that progressive age, seemed to be a huge push. In 1976, there was an exhibition at the Everson that was kind of slices of fashion. There was a bathing suit, and there was a gown from the 30s. It was sort of just looking at fashion and the breadth of the collection. So that was the first Everson show. 1983, a benefactor named Leon Jeanette created the Jeanette Gallery of Textile Arts and funded the collection, and they actually carved out a space in Slocum Hall that was an actual gallery. And the collection was then renamed the American Costume Collection. 2006, Slocum Hall was slated for renovation to become the new School of Architecture, so the costume collection was completely packed and moved to a very odd location out on South Campus, where it sat until 2011 when we were unpacking it. 2009, I created an exhibition, which was a very strange one, at the Everson Museum, which some of you might have seen, called Marie Antoinette, Styling of the 18th Century Superstar. I read everything I could about Marie Antoinette and then just created modern interpretations of what she would have been wearing, using couture mostly from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. So that was my first work with the Everson. I think they thought I was completely insane, but it was a fun show. 2011, the collection then came down to the warehouse. Our department was moved from Lyman Hall to the warehouse building downtown, the Nancy Cantor warehouse. And at that point, we renamed the collection the Sue Ann Jeanette Costume Collection in honor of the family that was funding the collection. Then 2012, and I'll explain why this happened, the Styling American Family show at Craftsman Farms opened, and then that same show moved back to the Everson with a slightly different format in 2013. 2013, I was also doing a show at the Onondaga Historical Association, which was on cocktail clothes. We've done a couple of books. And then this summer, and I will show you, in 2024, we had a complete renovation of the warehouse, but you know, in our world, we're most excited because our costume collection's been completely renovated and enlarged. So that's sort of what we are. Leon Jeanette, graduated of 53, always was a big Syracuse supporter. His wife, Sue Ann, was a textile artist and a sculptor. She died very suddenly in 1980 when their oldest daughter was coming to Syracuse. And the dean of the College for Human Development was so kind to the family that he said, what can I do? What can I give back to the college? And so he did two things. One was to fund the costume collection, which was the collection and this great display area for students who are doing textiles and the historic costumes. He also created a lecture series, which again, some of you might have gone to. He ran it for 21 years. Every semester, 21 years, if you can imagine this, every semester he brought 3 professionals from 3 different industries, one from retailing, one from fashion, and one from food, because this was human development. So you would have a lineup of Oscar de la Renta, then you'd have the Nordstrom brothers flying in from Seattle, and then you would have David Boulay coming up and talking to the restaurant students. And this was every semester. So I started in 1992, and it was just incredible the number of people that Leon brought that we were able to meet with. We started out in Slocum Hall. We were over on the first floor, took up the whole wing over there, which of course now is the School of Architecture, and we're now downtown in the School of Design. So if you haven't been down there, it's sort of a cool building, an old warehouse building that was built in the 20s. And this is our entrance to the costume collection, although there are surprises to come. And the collection itself is housed in this way. Our holdings, we have about 5,000 garments spanning from 1820 up to the present. And our collection is really looking at production techniques, labor and craft, really to produce high fashion. So we're looking at how things are cut and constructed. And important groupings, one of them is this very large group of things from that progressive age. Our collection use, we have tour groups through, so students come in. We have some sample pieces. These young ladies wanted to know about 18th century fashion and how difficult it was to wear side hoops. Students come in, they're working on their senior collections, and they can pull pieces out, turn them inside out, take pictures of them. So it's a lot of use in that way. We have tour groups come through. This was the Home Sewing Guild of Rochester came and looked at the collection. And hopefully, and later on we'll be talking about this, we're creating a database so that the collection will be accessible from anywhere in the world. So that's the dream. Exhibitions, obviously we use them for exhibitions, which is where we ended up here. This was the Marie Antoinette show that I created at the Everson, which was this sort of crazy fantasy land. Other shows that we've done featuring Emilio Pucci. This was clothing 1900 to 2000, so 100 years of fashion. You can see the students use it to sketch. Everything was navy blue. This was one of our book releases. We were showing pieces that were featured in the book. the Onondaga Historical Association show, if any of you had a chance to see that back in 2013. Fairly recently, we did a show on Mary McFadden, who unfortunately just passed away very recently. An exhibition on snow clothing, what the students would have worn. This was the sesquicentennial of the university, so it was 1870 to 2020. Is that right? Yeah. Fairly recently, Bill Blass, and then our most recent show, which was last fall, was the effects that Piet Mondrian had on art, design, and fashion. So all of these objects that have been heavily influenced by him. So, but our story, that the reason that I'm here, begins with David Rudd and Craftsman Farms. In 2011, we were moving to the collection to the warehouse, and we needed to reorganize the collection. So they gave us a room that had been climate controlled, and everything is sealed. We had a floor, we had a ceiling, which if you've been at the warehouse, you know that was kind of a rarity. And they gave us 8 rolling racks. I think they were being very optimistic. So we ordered more rolling racks, and the collection arrived. It was in 375 of these gray boxes. So the boxes kept coming, and you can see the gray lockers. Everything came out of storage and was just deposited right off the elevator on our floor. There were mountains of boxes. It was unreal, the amount of things. And it felt like, if you've seen the movie Groundhog Day, this is exactly the same. Every day we would go in and we would open the boxes and take things out, beautifully packed, but there would be a dress from 1820 and then a dress from 1960, and then there would be a dress from 1950. There would be days that would go by that we didn't want to keep any of the things we found in the boxes because they just weren't great. Everything was beautifully packed, but it was random. So we started to hang by time period to see what we even had. But in the meantime, these boxes don't collapse. They're incredibly expensive archival boxes. And we didn't know what to do with them. You can see, if you know Todd Conover, you know he was not thrilled in this experience. So we were unboxing, and so we needed to do something with these boxes. We didn't want to throw them away. They were all created by Gaylord here in Syracuse. So we had contacted Onondaga Historical Association, and they came and got like 200 of the boxes. And we were giving them to all these different places. And then Todd Conover said, I'm part of the Arts and Crafts Society, and there's this man named David Rudd, who also has connections with Craftsman Farms, and they might want some of these boxes. So that was when we got involved. David came up to the collection, and we showed him what we were doing. And he said, do you have anything that represents the arts and crafts era? And I said, that's a really good question. I don't know what that means. I mean, I'm thinking of arts and crafts furniture, and I'm like, well, was there something, like some very pared down, actually looking at Adelaide Robinow today, I was realizing her outfit is extremely simple. But I hadn't ever seen any mention of it. So while rehousing, I thought, okay, we need to do some research on this, and discovered that there wasn't really a specific fashion. It was just what fashion was at the time. So David pitched, and this was an amazing idea, to create a pilot exhibition at the warehouse where we would put fashion of the period next to the furniture, throw it against the wall, see if it stuck, and what happened? What does that look like? What does the person who's going to go buy the piece of furniture look like standing next to the piece of furniture? So that was where we started, and I was doing some research, found the original Princeton University Arts and Crafts exhibit, because again, I don't even think they have any textiles at all, but there's no clothing, obviously, because it wasn't really a thing. But we needed the furniture and ceramics, and it was absolutely a dream with David. He said, come down and pick out anything you want from Dalton's. So, and of course I'm completely oblivious to the value of all of these things. So I'm in there looking at things, and you were truly amazing. You were like, whatever you want, we'll have it moved up to the university. So we were picking pieces and picking pieces. I think there probably was a reason at the time that why we were picking specific things, and I'm sure that it was heavily led by David. So then we started to assemble mannequins and dress them and put them next to the furnishings. So this was a promotional picture that had been created, showing clothing from 1910 or 11 with the arts and crafts furnishings. So the exhibit was pulled together, and it opened in 2011. And so it was the American Look, Fashion, and Furnishings of the Arts and Crafts era. So we literally lined up the furnishings and the clothing. We had some incredible pieces that I still can't believe that you loaned to us. And then we took an image out of Craftsman magazine and blew it up large and created our sort of room vignette. So as we were doing this, we also did a spin-off on American fashion. And again, this was something that Edward Bach at Ladies' Home Journal was really rallying for. And Gustav Sickley then, probably under Irene Sargent, had done also an entire expose about how Paris shouldn't be the center of fashion. American women have their own style, on and on and on. So this was a two-part show in that way. But what we noticed was that comparisons did start to emerge. I mean, look at this vase compared to this dress. We started to see similar details and colors and motifs showing up. If you look at the front of this dress and the front of that fireplace screen, everything started to come together. So at this point, we had two groups of people come down. At the time, Heather Stuyvesant was the head of Craftsman Farms, and Vonda Given both came up from Craftsman Farms to see the show. And then Stephen Kern, and it was, who was our curator at Deborah?
Oh,
Deborah Ryan, yes, came to see the show, and both of them said this would be a great show to move to our venues. Two completely different concepts, one being to install into a historic home, the other to look at it in a slightly different way. So we were thinking why the Sue Anjanette costume collection should go into the Stickley home. We wanted to wrap our minds around this, and then we realized that the clothes we had in the collection were mostly donated from Syracuse donors. So these are the kinds of clothes the Stickley family certainly would have seen. They were from Syracuse, they were mostly American. I don't know that we have anything European from that period. As a matter of fact, I started to do a deep dive both in our collection and in the Historical Society, thinking, you know, I wonder if any of the Stickley's family, any of the married daughters, had donated any clothes to any repository, because it didn't seem that far afield that could have happened. I didn't ever run across anything, but that made us feel that, yes, this collection makes sense. And then we were saying, you know, why Craftsman Farms? Like, why would we take everything so far south? Well, obviously because it was the only known house that was completely built designed and built for Gustav Stickley after his Columbus Avenue house. And of course, and I just left these in gratuitously, but of course the house here in Syracuse, which was, and it was great fun to look at all of these sorts of things, and then now it's amazing the work that has been done on the house, taking it from what it had become back to the way the family saw it. And I loved these original images that were in the Craftsman magazine when we were visiting the house of Mr. Stickley. And I think it's interesting that the little characters really look like little William Morris reform dresses from the 1890s, even though this was done much later time. But I think it's so amazing to see the drawings and then the actual house, and then the way it was all put together. So we have Gustav Sickley, we have his wife, Ida, the 5 daughters, and again, you can see that they're wearing contemporary high fashion at the time, his son. And so it made sense to do this show at Craftsman Farms. Now, what we didn't want to do was to represent the family. That we started down that path, and it was like, no, we're not going to do that. We're actually going to just style an American family who happens to have a prominent father. So that made it a little bit easier and a little bit more generic, although we did follow a few things that happened at Craftsman Farms. And you're on this like roaring highway, and then you get off, and all of a sudden there's, you know, deer, and the birds are chirping, and it's like this beautiful little enclave. So the exhibition, when we sat down to really get to it, it ended up being 32 mannequins altogether, which is a lot of mannequins to do. So we went into the collection and started to pull things, and we wanted groupings to show up, which did. So you can see this was, we were trying to pull mannequins. Mannequins come in, they're in whatever pose they're molded in is the pose they come in, so you have to select them from that way. So one group, for example, was Ida and 3 of the girls went to Bermuda in 1913. So we were pulling, what would that look like if they were getting their outfits together for this trip to Bermuda? Motoring, we discovered that the Stickley family had quite a number of automobiles at Craftsman Farms. So everything was selected, restored, packed, and there was a lot of time between then and here. But here we had landed at Craftsman Farms with the pile of clothes. Pete Mars was incredibly helpful in this whole process. The amount of hats, the amount of petticoats. We had something like 65 petticoats for this show, which you wouldn't think you would have to go out and discover. So for the first iteration of this, Craftsman Farms 1909 to 1914, shown in the Arts and Crafts environment, Bungalow magazine appreciated it enough that they actually ran an entire article using our photographs from the university. So we had created this wedding scene because Barbara Stickley-Wiles had gotten married on the front porch, although again it was sort of imaginary wedding. Young ladies that were coming to visit the farms. Now, what we discovered by doing this, by putting the people back into the space, suddenly the rooms became warmer. You could see the colors of the leather from the books, the colors from the furniture really started to come to life when you brought in all of this fabric and the textiles. The group of girls around the piano all wearing these lingerie dresses. We found articles in the Morris Plain newspaper about parties that the Stickley girls had, and that at night they would be, just at twilight, you would see them looking like white ghosts down dancing in the trees, wearing these kinds of dresses. Again, the motoring things. One of the things that emerged from the Stickley family fairly late in the process was that the two motoring coats in the back actually were from the Stickley family. And then in the bedroom, we outfitted, here's the girls that are playing tennis. Again, we found photos of the girls, the Stickley girls playing tennis. So we knew that these were the kinds of things that would have happened. The only group that I wasn't really sure of was this group of girls dancing, but there were so many dance cards that you would have had put around your wrist and signed, the young men would have signed dances away. We found so many that belonged to the Stickley girls that we knew that they had been going to parties and they loved, there was some country club that they would go hang out at. So I knew we needed to do this, and I was thinking, okay, this isn't going to work to put these little frothy dresses, even though they were living there at the time. But you'll see later, it actually did all pull together. So that was the exhibit at Craftsman Farms. Then we were going to move it to the Everson, where it became the American Look, Fashion, Decorative Arts, and Gustav Stickley. So in this instance, now the clothing was going to be seen as a comparison next to the furniture. So now we're going to isolate the clothing, isolate the ceramics and the furniture, and see some of those similarities. So again, an amazing experience going with David through the holdings at the Everson, going through his amazing shop, probably things from your home too, that were selected for the show. I was able to go with Deb through all of the Robino pieces. I thought that we were mostly sticking with Robino, but I realized there was some Fulper in there as well. So that was our push at the Everson, and this is what the show looked like. I did joke that I felt like I was designing the icebergs from the Titanic because everything was white. But we really wanted to isolate the clothing, isolate the furniture, and isolate the ceramics. So this is what the show looked like in its entirety. There's also, because we did so much with Adelaide Robino and her work was so beautiful, we did include another little piece. And you'll see in the back, part of this was that this was the beginnings of the Columbus Avenue house being given to, originally, the Everson. The Everson was going to take ownership and do the restoration, which ended up not happening. But we had gotten back this piece of furniture from Craftsman Farms that had been in the house, in the Columbus Avenue house. So the categories that we looked at, craftsmanship, proportion, color, and motif. So with craftsmanship, and we keep hearing the same idea, honesty in making, honoring the materials, honoring the construction. So we immediately looked to this thing called a lingerie dress that was made in the same style as undergarments and made out of the same fabric as undergarments. And so when you're looking at an actual piece from the era, obviously in terms of the furnishings, it's honestly made. We know what kind of wood this is, we can see the grain, we can see exactly how it's put together, every detail is there. They're not trying to hide anything. They haven't tried to hide the joins. They haven't painted the wood. And in that same way, when you look at these lingerie dresses, which were available to everyone, you couldn't hide. There's nowhere to hide with these. And it was also wonderful finding like this photo of Barbara Stickley in 1903 over here in her lingerie or lawn dress. Mildred Stickley with the flower in her hair. And then again, this was part of the reason that we pulled all of these white dresses together for the show. So now we were able to put these next to the furnishings and next to the ceramics. And somehow this 1910 scarab vase looked so perfect next to these pieces. That filigree, the detail, and you can see every piece of handwork. You had to be flawless with your sewing construction because it all shows. The hem stitching that's holding the pieces of leather, of lace together, all of the cut-out little motifs that are applied. So in many ways, the construction was very much exposed. It was very much the same idea. Interestingly, the only garment that showed up at Craftsman Farms that actually belonged to one of the family members, this was a shirtwaist blouse that was Barbara Stickley's, the oldest daughter's blouse from the period of Craftsman Farms, but we didn't get it until too late, and so it went into a shopping vignette where the girls were buying it. Proportion, and it just became really obvious when we put the furniture next to the clothes. I mean, you can see the proportions are absolutely there. I mean, it's almost scary. The cutout of the front of the clock is like the cutout of the front of the dress. They mimicked each other. This idea of the huge mushroom hat on this Fulper vase, the lines on this beautiful bookcase. Now, this wasn't the one you just showed, is it? I don't think this one has the carving on the sides of it.
Oh, no, that one doesn't have the carving.
But was it the same
same
animal?
Thing. Yeah, I actually gave that to him
okay.
years ago.
It so mimics all of these pleats and tucks and linear movement in the dress. So that was fun. We looked at color, and of course the color palette of Arts and Crafts is very complex, grayed down color palette, and the clothes, of course, are right there. The Dirk Van Erp lamp, so warm and beautiful against this. The Adelaide Robinot. The funny thing about this, too, was that I was working with Deb Ryan. A lot of the Adelaide Robinot pieces were in storage, and so I was looking at slides on her computer top, and I would say, we need that one and that one and that one. Then she went and she got the box, and she said, here, like, this thing is like this big. It's like,
it's about that.
it felt like it was the tiniest thing in the world. I'm like, this isn't going to make the statement I thought it was going to make. But in a slide, it makes a great statement. In terms of motif, looking at Harvey Ellis's work, which is sort of a blend of Art Nouveau and William Morris, you see those coming together in the embellishments. Here's some portieres that Harvey Ellis designed. So it would be quite large motifs if these were hanging in doorways. And this was in Craftsman magazine. And then these are some arts and crafts pieces that I don't believe have anything to do with the Stickley designs.
That's a Stickley card.
What is this one, a Stickley one? So the idea of modifying nature and doing this sort of almost cubist moment with it, taking these flowers and turning them into little squares. So finding these clothes that have this kind of embroidery, and this, again, this as a portiere done in really heavy linen with this sort of abstracted floral, and then we've got this dress done in this really coarse linen. This is what the dress looks like, again, with the asymmetrical panel. It just, again, reads very much Arts and Crafts. Here's how it looked in the house. This was Harvey Ellis, the whiplashes that were created in metal showing up in the soutache braid. And then, of course, we were also then dealing with, are we historically correct in what the girls are looking like? This dress showed up between the two shows. This dress showed up from someone actually in New Jersey. It just arrived on our desk. We opened it up, and I said, oh my gosh, this has to go next to one of the pieces of Harvey Ellis. And this is a sewing rocker. Just such a beautiful little piece. And the two together, when you saw them together, it was really incredible. Another one of the embroideries, and again, another Harvey Ellis with these long tendrils hanging down. And then this piece, which I think you said is, it's sort of a, can you explain this one a little bit?
Well, it's Gustav Stickley.
Yes.
I can't remember the title of it, but he used Japanese names for the title.
I think this one was called the Tabaret. Or that's just the style. Okay.
Okay, so this one might have been like the Yokohama.
Okay.
Right? And the tile never was glued in because the person that decorated that in 1902 signed it underneath the tile.
I wondered what that signature was. Okay. Interesting. So this was not done at the factory. This was
done at the factory.
Oh, it was done at the factory. Interesting. And then it has that beautiful groovy tile that sits in it, and the colors and the design, it was really beautiful to see those together. And another stickly, the idea of taking a flower and caging it in a square, and we're seeing that in this wonderful handbag. That group of frothy little dresses, the florals, again, I thought, I don't understand how this is going to really fit with these groups of things. But these were some of the dance cards that this was part of Marion's scrapbook that was so amazing. But these are the kinds of dresses that they would have worn. And we had this beautiful picture of Hazel Stickley when she was presented. I think it was her coming out party at the Waldorf Astoria, and this was about that time. So we knew that they were wearing these lacy, frothy dresses, but coming from the farms. So it didn't seem so out of place at that point that these dresses would have been worn there, and they would have gone off to the country club or wherever in their automobile. But then we looked at the carpet, and there were all the colors and the softness and the florals all coming out of this beautiful rug. And then when you pair them next to Adelaide Robineau's pieces, I mean, it's just right there. The colors, I love the long tendrils that are hanging off the dress and in the designs. This one looks like it could be a fashion sketch for this dress. I mean, it's just amazing to me. The colors, the proportion of it. And then again, for scale, you can see that they were fairly small pieces, but they were just so lovely together in the museum. And then just wrapping up with the renovation of our building and becoming a destination for people to really come to. We just had the renovation of the warehouse building. If any of you have been to the warehouse in the past, if you've gone to the Empty Bowls extravaganza that they have down there, you might have been there if you've gone to see any of the shows that I've curated there. But this is what our floor looked like a year ago. You get off the elevator, it's a warehouse. It looks like a warehouse, all concrete, and we have portable walls, and this is the way everything looks. But with the magic of $7 million and about 4,000 workers, this is now our floor. So now when you get off, this is what we have. Now what we had before, I showed you, this was the Symposium costume collection. You open it up, there was a small anteroom, and then you went into the collection. This is now the Symposium costume collection, and with our giant vitrine, this is now our research center, and beautiful waiting for all of the computer terminals to go in, and the tables so that you can ask for clothes and have them brought out. And our storage space is now twice as large as it was. And again, completely climate controlled, and we now have an office. So you can not have to do everything all in one room. So that's it. So come visit us. Thank you. I know